Welcome to Yates Makes. Today we're doing stop motion animation with the cut paper technique. Here's my little jumping robot I've made just to illustrate a few tips, tricks, techniques to get you started. So we're using stop motion on the iPad. You can get it on smartphones too. Let's get started. We'll talk about setup first. So here is my background taped to the desk. I've got my robot drawn out, cut out all the separate parts that I want to animate. The antennae, the eyes, the mouth, the arms, the legs. It's all cut out on separate pieces. I've also got some tweezers because they're quite useful for moving things around. So that's my base. I've got my frames per second rate set at 24. We'll come back to that later. And I've got my camera in a fixed position above. I've actually improvised by putting a chair on the table, balancing my iPad on the edge of the chair, putting a little weight to keep it stable to make sure my iPad does not shift a millimeter between frames. Right, let's look at a first skill, and that's just using the onion skin. So to illustrate this, I'm going to try and make my lights flash on the robot's tummy and make the antennae alternate green and pink flashes. So you'll see that on the left there's this little slider. Now that's your onion skin slider, and I'm using that just to help me position. I can see the faintest ghost of my previous shot frame, and that helps me line up my parts to keep the movement nice and fluid. Okay, the next skill we're going to look at is something called shooting in twos. Also, we're going to cover copying and pasting frames. So I'm going to get the heart to flash on the tummy of my robot. Now to do that, I'm simply going to shoot frames with the heart on the tummy and the heart off, and copy and paste those frames. The problem I've got though is with my frame rate set at 24 frames per second, having one shot with it on, one shot with it off might make it flash too quickly. So I'm going to shoot in twos, as we call it, and essentially all that means is doubling up. So you can either shoot 2 frames, or you can copy paste 1 frame that you've shot, just like I'm doing at this point in the video. Now of course, if you want your action to last longer, shoot in 3s or 4s. Okay, I'm going to just demonstrate this idea again by creating a blink. Okay, again it will show you how to shoot in 2s, 3s or 4s to freeze action for a slightly longer fraction of a second. So to make a blink, all you're going to need is a couple of discs big enough to cover the eyes that are the same colour as the base colour of whatever your character is, in my case grey. You're going to position those discs over the eyes, and just like before, so that the blink lasts for slightly longer than 1/24 of a second, you're going to double or even triple, quadruple that shot by either copying and pasting or clicking, shooting 2, 3 or 4 times. Now to complete my blink, you'll see me now scrolling back along my frames to where the eyes were uncovered, copying that frame, scrolling back to the end, pasting it a couple of times with my eyes open. You can keep copying and pasting to make your blink duplicate, of course, just by selecting, copying and pasting the correct frames you need. Okay, let's talk about creating slightly more complex movements. First though, let's explain frame rate. The kind of standard for the animation industry is either 12 or 24 frames per second. These work because they're nicely divisible by 2, 3 and 4, and as I've already explained, doubling, tripling, shooting in 2s, 3s or 4s is really important. So let's have a look. I'm going to just demonstrate a few quick, simple, beginner level things about creating movement. So I want my arm to wave. So I can achieve this by shooting one frame with it up, one frame with it down. I can then copy and paste those two frames to repeat that movement, so my robot waves his arms up and down a few times. Now again, it might be a bit fast, set at 24 frames per second with only one frame for each of these positions. So I could copy and paste those frames so they run for 2s, 3s or 4s as we've explained. That would slow things down a bit, but it might look a little clunky. What about if we want a smoother action? Well look, why not try this? Look, smaller movements between each shot. So you can see there I've just shifted the arm up a tiny bit and shot another frame. And again, moving it ever so slightly, try not to disturb the rest of my pieces. That's why the tweezers and a finger are useful. And look, each time I move a slight adjustment on that arm, I take another shot. And again, I'm going to now do the kind of return movement, and down goes the arm in small adjustments. This is going to slow the action down a little, but also make the action smoother because you're giving the viewer's eye more information rather than just the up position and the down position. Okay, so we've covered shooting in 2s, 3s or 4s, creating some more complex movements, how to create blinks, flashing lights, etc. Let's move on to looking at more complex movement. So I'm going to slow my animation right down now so we can analyze how it's moving. Now in order to get this right, I rehearsed it. So I actually jumped up and down on the spot, and I got one of my kids to do the same, so I could really watch what happened to the arms, how the body was stretched and how the body compressed throughout that whole movement. Also, some parts of the movement are quicker than others. The crouch is quite slow, and then there's a burst of energy where the robot moves a bit quicker as it jumps in the air. It hovers a little in the air before coming back down to a landing, and then there's a pause while it stood. So in order to get all of those motions, like I said, I observed a person jumping up and down on the spot. And here I am making those small adjustments, head coming down, antennae coming down with them but slightly changing angles, little adjustments in the eyes to create a bit of expression, and it's trial and error as well. Very easy to cut a frame that you've just shot that you're not happy with. Okay, you can scroll back and forth and add in a little blink in while he's crouched as well. Again, all these little embellishments add a bit more life. Okay, so this was quite a complex movement that took a lot of work, but it's really rewarding work. My best advice is choose a movement to get started with this technique that will loop as well. You can then save your animation as a GIF and it will just play as a loop. So you want to make sure your kind of end frame is pretty much the same as your start frame. Then you have an action that will just repeat as it plays. Okay, you can see there my animation ended up at about 60 frames. I copied and pasted my first frame to the end to make sure it looped nicely. A really rewarding outcome. Remember, you can always delete frames from your sequence to get the pace as you want it, to get the action as smooth as you like. Experiment, have fun. If you enjoyed this, if it inspired you to have a go, like, share, subscribe. Take it easy. See you soon.